What's up, suckers? It is me, and before we get into the video, if this is your kind of thing, please, 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 for the love of God, like and subscribe, because it helps me find new people, helps new people find me, and that is the spice of life. If you are listening to this as a podcast, please still subscribe. You're not off the hook. Okay, so we're going to be talking about money management today, and I want to make it clear that I am not coming from a financial expert standpoint. I'm not a financial expert in any shape or form. My husband is a lot more money-minded than me, and a lot of the time when he starts talking about numbers and finances and starts using terms like Roth IRA, I fall asleep. So that's not what this is about. I also want to make it clear that I have not particularly mastered this either. I don't know that many ADHDers do, because essentially, well, most of the time I am a fan of working with your brain. This is one of those things where you actually do have to work against it, and it can be very hard, especially when the impulse hits to spend. So just giving you a little bit of my background with overspending. I started out as a photographer, actually, back in, I want to say 2016, 2015. And I didn't realize how bad my spending had gotten until we were clearing out our house to move to Florida. And I found that I had like 3 of the same tripod and 2 of the same light. And I just had like all of this stuff that I had spent money on that I hadn't bothered to like keep track of. And it took me many, many years and getting diagnosed, honestly. So only about a year have I been aware of where this comes from. But the more that I have talked to my clients, to other ADHDers, the more that I have kind of read up on it, it really seems like our impulse to buy does sometimes have a connection to feelings of boredom, to feelings of insecurity, to anger. You know, like sometimes we're feeling kind of spiteful, and it just feels good to go ahead and blow like $500 on, I don't know, the old troll dolls with like the little wish gems in them. I don't know. I probably just dated myself, but whatever. So sometimes it is emotional, but I think the hardest part is when it's not. So if you do find that a lot of your impulse spending, you know, that impulse tends to hit, that need for dopamine seems to hit when you are feeling particularly low, I want to make it clear, I don't do therapy. So you really want to have a therapist to help you work through better ways to handle your emotions. But if you are finding that sometimes it's just you suddenly just have this weird impulse to buy something that you don't really need, and you tend to buy it, and then you tend to feel ashamed afterwards, and you can tell that it's kind of causing problems in your relationships, or, you know, really even in just your relationship with yourself, then this at least might help, because these have been things that have been helping me to the point where I went from spending an embarrassing amount of money on phone apps, phone games. I shouldn't say phone apps, because I don't want people looking back at my channel and being like, Ariana, you review apps. I thought you said you use the free. No, I use the free trial all the time. I'm talking about like games like bingo and solitaire, because I'm secretly an 80-year-old woman. And I would embarrassingly spend like anywhere from $100 to $200 sometimes on these games, because it's really easy, especially when you have a brain that's really good at rationalizing like we do, to say, well, it's just $2.99. Well, it's just $19.99. Well, it's just $5.99. But those things add up when you do it like 5,000 times. So, you know, I went from spending that much to I've actually spent $0 this month. So I feel like these things might actually help you if you are struggling with the same thing. There's really 2 main things that have helped me out quite a bit, besides just kind of recognizing when I might be emotionally triggered into overspending. So the first thing is having a goal to save up to, like having something to save up for. When you don't have anything to look forward to with that money. It's almost kind of like when you're planning your day and you're planning your tasks. Sometimes if those tasks don't don't come to fruition and end with a reward, you're not going to be able to force yourself to do what it is that you need to do. On the other hand, if you are the kind of person who needs that and you set up a reward, which I've talked about before, you have a very, very good chance of at least making it halfway there. But a lot of the time you'll wind up actually at least working towards that reward with that reward in mind. So money works the same way for us anyway. By and large, one thing that makes it worth it to not spend, $50 on a new pair of shoes is the concept that, okay, I could spend this $50, but if I do that, it's going to set me back from getting this thing that I want way more. And you could be like, okay, but what if that pair of shoes is my goal? I'm going to tell you right now, set that goal high, okay? Because the whole point isn't just to save up to this thing, it's to slowly work yourself out of the habit of spending money when you feel the impulse. And the impulse will sometimes be strong, don't get me wrong. And we'll get into how to kind of help sometimes when it's really strong. But one thing about goal setting is that in this case, bigger is better. Like, plan for a trip that's going to cost you thousands, or plan for, I don't know, a new computer that's going to be multiple hundreds of dollars for you over time. Make sure that it's something that you are going to have to save a lot of money for, is my point. Obviously, I know nothing about computers, but, and I used a trip because for me, I want to go see Hamilton on Broadway. And the tickets alone sometimes are like $400 fucking dollars. So in my heart, I feel like, okay, well, if I was going to do this, I would want to fly like first class, and I'd want to do this and I'd want to do that. And that would be an expensive ass trip. I think I did the math and it was like $15K. Do I know if I'll ever go to $15K? No. But right now, my point is just to have that in the back of my mind every time I'm about to spend money. And I have my goal somewhere that I am going to look every day. I have it in my ClickUp personally. But you can just draw a thermometer and put it somewhere and, color in the red area every time you make a little bit of extra money. It's extremely important that you see the progress that you're making. Not just that you make that progress, but that you also see it, because that in itself will actually trigger that dopamine. So the second thing that's really been helping me out a lot is keeping track of my finances. And if you're kind of like laughing like, okay, like, isn't that the whole point? No. I'm talking about just your finances, like yours specifically. If you are in a family, and if you handle everybody else's finances, like, that's great, but you want to focus on your finances specifically. And the best way to do this is to make sure that you are handling all personal purchases with one form of payment and in one account, and then you are handling everything that has to do with business, if you own a business, with a different account or different form of payment. Now, if you are the kind of person who really doesn't like to mess with money that much, I get it, but this is going to be very important, because I started realizing I needed help the first time that I was actually able to sit down and look at how much money I had spent. It's not fun. And I think a lot of the time the reason why we avoid it, I think, for one, it's boring for a lot of us. But I think on the other hand, we know, right? We know we fucked up. We know that we're going to see these numbers and we're not going to like it. But seeing it and not liking it is part of getting better. So just to kind of give you an idea of how I handle it personally, what I do is I have an account that I share with my husband for household payments. And then I have a business account, business checking. And then I have a savings account. And what I do is I follow something called the profit first method. I'm not entirely certain how this would work for someone who does not own a business. I'm sure that there's a way to adjust this. for people who don't, or that there's probably a way already out there. And what I'm about to tell you is very simplified. Okay, so nobody come at me being like, there's more to it than that. There probably is, all right? But I can barely do math in my head correctly the first time. So deal. So the way that this works is it's meant for business owners to be able to pay themselves after every sale, instead of the usual way where you make money, and then when you're comfortable with where your business is, then you start paying yourself. And it does this off of a very specific way where it makes it so that you look at how much you make gross every year, or how much you are making overall, and then you take a certain percentage per sale for yourself for profit to pay yourself for taxes and for operational purposes. And generally, anybody who's following Profit First is also going to tell you that you want to keep like multiple bank accounts for everything, and you can do that, but I choose instead to have one that holds on to my operational costs, and my savings, which holds on to what I pay myself and my taxes. And then I have my household account with my husband where I send, whatever profit I have. And the profit and the pay are generally the same amount. So, you could say that one is for my pay and one is for profit. Doesn't really matter. But I keep track of this in a spreadsheet that I made that was a lot of fun. And essentially what it does is it tallies that up for me as I go. And I only go through my costs once a week. And the way that I am able to keep track of what my costs are versus what other people's costs are is that I have one card connected to my house account that I use for personal purchases. And then I have one that is just for business costs. And so all I have to do is sign into the accounts for each of these cards. And I have it set on my calendar for every Friday. Every Friday I go in, I look at what I've spent in the bank for my business and what I've spent in the bank for my personal. I put that into my spreadsheet, and Bob's your uncle, there you are. Also, Bob's your uncle, where did that come from? Does anybody know? Drop a comment or something if you know where the hell it comes from. It's such a weird comment. And I would be happy to show you guys my spreadsheet if you want. It is nothing fancy or particularly exciting, but it works really well for me and makes it so that I am basically able to see how much I've paid myself for the year versus how much I've made for the year. And my husband, again, I've told you he's already more money-minded than me. He's looked at it and been like, some of these terms don't make any sense. Not the math, but like the terms that I've used. And I'm like, I don't particularly care. As long as I understand it, that's what's important. But the point is, by doing this, I have a much better handle on how I am doing financially. And because of that, recently we ran into a little bit of financial trouble, and it was like I already knew in the back of my head I can't spend any money, like none. There's no way I can spend any money. And what I did is I actually had that kind of in the back of my mind, and every time that impulse would hit, because I had seen those numbers and I had seen that data directly in front of me, it was a lot easier for me to back up and say, I don't want to spend this money. Like, yeah, the impulse is strong to spend, but infinitely stronger is my need to, be able to buy food. So it kind of helps us, I think, to have that information in front of us. And you don't have to go the profit first method if you don't really want to, or if you don't have a business and, it's not going to work in that particular case for you. You can just set up a regular sheet online. I definitely do still suggest that you use something that's going to calculate for you, just because we also have a tendency to miss very important details, and you don't want to wind up, missing anything. And set one day during the week where you are going to just go in and you're going to look at what your costs are. You're going to add those in, add in what you've been paid, and then, kind of see where you're at. Now, I want to add a couple things. First off, if you use Profit First, it sounds magical to be like, oh my gosh, I get to pay myself. But the fact is, unless you're making $250K or more, you're really not going to be taking home a lot. Most of the time, whatever you make, you're going to be taking home like 10%. And that's if you put your pay and your profit together. If you don't, then you're taking home 5. So that is kind of, not as exciting as you think. Like if you're like, oh my God, I just made $1,000. Yeah, that changes when you realize that you didn't actually make $1,000. You made 100. So that's one thing. So don't be, disappointed if you follow this method and you're like, Ariana, I got to pay myself and it was nice and all, but I made $20. It's like, yeah, that's just kind of what happens. But it adds up over time, and keeping that aforementioned goal that you had before in your head is really going to help you kind of move past that, because you're like, well, at least I'm making money towards something, right? And putting it in a savings account too, for some reason, for most people, ADHDers included, that almost kind of feels untouchable. Like you're like, that's cool and all, but I'm not going to touch it because it's in savings. Savings is where it's supposed to stay. So that also kind of helps. The second thing is, if you've been having problems with your spending, chances are that when you sit down to finally do this, your first image of your personal finances are going to be distressing. You're going to feel really bad. And like I said, do not do therapy. So I can't really fix this for you, but I can tell you that one thing that helps is remembering that you are doing this to make it better. So even if you look at it and you're like, holy shit, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. I feel so incredibly embarrassed and ashamed. All of those are natural feelings to have. But you also need to give yourself the credit that you are working towards making it better. And that in itself counts for something. And probably what would happen, because I think it happens for most ADHDers, is once you are faced explicitly with the results of your actions, you tend to kind of step a little bit more carefully. And it's going to make it so that, you're not necessarily going to feel bad about yourself or your finances forever. And the most important part, like I said, is taking that first step. So anyway, I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I will be happy to answer them. If you want to see how my spreadsheet works, I'd be happy to go ahead and maybe do like a short of it or something. I would probably have to clear out one and give you a dummy one so that I'm not like just putting all of my own financial information out there, but I would be happy to show you guys how it works, or even just make it available to you guys to get if you want. But other than that, thank you very much for watching. Take good care of yourself, drink plenty of water, and I'll see you next time.